for 3 years. I believed Marlene Voss ignored me at every family dinner because I was not good enough for her son. I told myself the silence was just snobbery. But when I uncovered a document worth $4 million with a signature that looked like mine, but was not, the truth hit me cold. Her cruelty was not an insult. It was offense. She was not trying to hurt my feelings. She was trying to hide a lifetime of lies. The crystal chandeliers inside the grand ballroom of the Briar Glen Hotel were bright enough to hurt my eyes, but I kept my smile fixed in place. I had practiced this smile in the rear-view mirror of my sedan for 10 minutes before we arrived. It was the smile of a supportive wife, a woman who belonged, a woman who was not intimidated by the sheer weight of old money that suffocated this town. 33 years of life had taught me that respect was earned through competence and kindness. 3 years of marriage to Ethan Voss had taught me that in Briar Glen, respect was inherited, and if you did not have the right last name at birth, you were simply scenery. I smoothed the fabric of my navy evening gown. It was elegant, understated, and had cost me a significant portion of my quarterly bonus from Norwood and Pike Consulting. I looked good. I knew I looked good. But as I stood next to Ethan, clutching a glass of lukewarm, sparkling water, I felt that familiar, creeping sensation of invisibility. Ethan looked dashing in his tuxedo, his dark hair swept back, his posture relaxed in the way only men who have never worried about rent can manage. He squeezed my hand. "You look beautiful." "Hazel," he whispered, leaning down. "Thank you," I said, squeezing back. "I am just trying not to trip. You are doing great. Just stick with me." That was the strategy. Stick with Ethan. As long as I was attached to his arm, I was tangible. If I drifted away, I became a ghost. We navigated the crowd, moving toward the center of the room where the board members of the Caldwell Civic Foundation were holding court. This gala was the event of the season in Massachusetts. It was where checkbooks were opened and social hierarchies were cemented for the coming year. And at the center of it all, holding court like a monarch in silk and pearls, was my mother-in-law, Marlene Voss. Marlene was 65 but looked 50. She possessed a terrifying, frozen kind of beauty, maintained by expensive creams and a will of iron. As we approached, she was laughing at something a silver-haired man was saying, her head thrown back, her hand resting lightly on his forearm. "Mom," Ethan said. Stepping into her orbit, Marlene turned, her eyes, the same pale blue as Ethan's, lit up when they landed on her son. She extended her hands, bypassing me entirely to grasp Ethan's shoulders. "Ethan!" she exclaimed, her voice carrying over the low hum of the jazz quartet. "You made it. I was worried you would get stuck in traffic coming from the city." "We made good time," Ethan said, stepping back slightly to bring me into the circle. "You know, Hazel." Marlene's gaze flickered to me. It was a look I had come to know intimately over the last 3 years. It was not a glare. It was not a scowl. It was a blank, polite gloss. The kind of look one gives a waiter who has just refilled a water glass. It acknowledged my physical presence while simultaneously dismissing my relevance. "Hello, Hazel," she said. Her tone was flat, devoid of the warmth she had just poured over her son. "You look lovely tonight, Marlene," I said, keeping my voice steady. "The venue is spectacular." Marlene barely nodded. She turned her back to me, pivoting instantly to the man she had been speaking with. "Senator, have you met my son, Ethan? He is taking on more responsibility with the family portfolio this year. We are very proud." I stood there, the smile beginning to ache on my face. I took a sip of water. I told myself it did not matter. I told myself that Marlene was just protective, that mothers of only sons often struggled to share space with daughters-in-law. I told myself to be the bigger person. But then the photographer arrived. He was a young man with a heavy camera slung around his neck, weaving through the heavy hitters, looking for the money shots that would appear in the society pages of the Briar Glen Gazette the next morning. "Mrs. Voss," the photographer said, beaming, "could we get a photo for the foundation newsletter?" "Of course," Marlene said, preening slightly. She beckoned Ethan closer. Ethan stepped in, his arm going around her waist. I stepped in as well, standing on Ethan's other side, angling my body toward the lens, ready to play the part of the happy young couple. The photographer raised his camera. "Actually," Marlene said, her voice sharp and clear. I froze. "Wait just a moment," Marlene said to the photographer, holding up a manicured hand. Then she turned to me. Her face was perfectly pleasant, but her eyes were cold stones. "Hazel, dear, would you mind stepping out for a second? We need a family photo. Only Voss's for this one. It is for the archives." The air left my lungs. It was not the request itself. It was the public nature of it. We were surrounded by the most powerful people in the county. Senator Miller was watching. The chairman of the hospital board was watching. The photographer lowered his camera, looking awkward. Ethan stiffened beside me. "Mom, Hazel is family." Marlene let out a tinkling, dismissive laugh. "Oh, stop it, Ethan. You know what I mean. The foundation likes to keep the lineage records clean. Just for this one shot." She made a shooing motion with her hand, a literal shooing motion. I felt the blood rush to my cheeks. It was a heat so intense I thought I might faint. I looked at Ethan. He looked torn, his eyes darting between his mother and me. He opened his mouth to argue, but Marlene cut him off. "Please, Ethan, do not make a scene. The senator is waiting. I made the choice for him. I refuse to be the woman causing a scene at a charity gala. I refuse to give her the satisfaction of seeing me upset." "It is fine," I said, my voice sounding strange to my own ears. "I will just grab a drink." I unhooked my arm from Ethan's and stepped back. I kept stepping back until I was out of the frame, until I was standing in the shadow of a large fern near the buffet table. The camera flashed. Marlene beamed. Ethan smiled. Though it looked tight, they looked like royalty. I looked like the help. I stood there for 20 minutes, watching them. I watched Marlene work the room. I saw her guide Ethan from group to group, and then I started to hear it. It was subtle, but once I noticed it, I could not stop hearing it. Marlene was introducing Ethan to a wealthy donor couple near the bar. I was close enough to hear, pretending to examine the label on a wine bottle. "And this is Ethan," Marlene said. "He is doing wonderful things. And is this his wife?" the woman asked, nodding in my general direction where I stood alone. Marlene did not turn to look at me. She just gave a tight, conspiratorial smile. "Oh, that is Hazel. She is Ethan's friend." "Friend," she said it lightly, as if correcting a common misconception. I felt a cold shock in my stomach. "Friend?" We had been married for 3 years. I wore his ring. We shared a home. We filed joint taxes. I moved away, my heart hammering. Maybe I had misheard. 10 minutes later, near the silent auction tables, I heard it again. Marlene was speaking to the director of the Arts Council. "Ethan is settled." "Yes," she was saying. "He has a companion. Hazel. She is very sweet. But you know how young men are these days. We let them find their own way. Companion. Friend." She was not just being rude. She was rewriting reality. She was erasing my legal and social status in real time, to the very people who mattered in this town. She was constructing a narrative where Ethan was essentially single, or at least, not permanently attached. I walked out to the terrace and stood in the freezing December air, gripping the stone railing. My knuckles were white. This was not social awkwardness. This was erasure. On the drive home, the silence in the car was thick enough to choke on. Ethan drove with both hands on the wheel, his eyes on the winding, dark roads that led back to our subdivision. I stared out the window at the passing trees, skeletal and black against the moonlight. "She called me your friend," I said finally. Ethan sighed. I heard the exhaustion in it. He reached over and tried to take my hand, but I kept it in my lap. "Hazel, please, do not let it get to you." She kicked me out of the photo. "Ethan, in front of the senator." And then I heard her tell 2 different groups of people that I was your companion, like I am a dog you adopted. Ethan winced. "Look, I know she can be difficult. She is just old-fashioned. She has these weird ideas about legacy and bloodlines. It is not personal." "Not personal?" I turned to look at him, She is pretending we are not married. How is that not personal? She is just protective, he said, his voice pleading. Since Dad has been stepping back, she feels like she has to hold on to everything tighter. She just wants to project a certain image of the Voss family standing strong. And I am not part of the Voss family? Of course you are. To me, you are. To you, I repeated, but not to her, and apparently not to anyone who matters in Briar Glen. Honey, you are overthinking it. She is just awkward socially. She does not know how to fit you into the old narratives she has in her head. Give her time. 3 years. Ethan, how much time does she need? Ethan did not answer. He just focused on the road, the tension radiating off him. I looked at his profile. I loved him. I knew I loved him. He was kind. He was gentle. And he was the only person who could make me laugh until I cried. But in that moment, I saw something weak in his jawline that I had never noticed before. He was afraid of her. He was a 34-year-old man, and he was terrified of his mother. We drove the rest of the way in silence. My life, outside of the Voss family drama, was orderly and successful. I was a project lead at Norwood and Pike Consulting, a firm that demanded high performance and gave high rewards. I managed multi-million-dollar implementation strategies for healthcare companies. I was good at spotting patterns. I was good at fixing broken systems. I was also the financial anchor of our marriage, though nobody in Ethan's circle would ever guess it. Ethan worked in business development, a vague title that mostly involved managing his family's various passive income streams and attending meetings that seemed to result in very little actual paperwork. His paycheck was deposited directly into what he called family-managed accounts, a structure Marlene had set up long before I came along. Because of this, I paid the mortgage on our house, I paid the electric bill, the water bill, the grocery bill, and the insurance premiums. Ethan contributed, of course, transferring money to our joint account when we needed it for vacations or large purchases. But the day-to-day survival of our household rested on my shoulders. I was proud of that. I was proud that we had built a calm, functional life despite the shadow of his family's wealth looming over us. I thought we were partners. I thought we were a team. But the seed Marlene had planted at the GALA, the feeling of being an outsider in my own life, began to take root. A week later, on a Tuesday morning, I was sitting at my desk at Norwood and Pike, toggling between spreadsheets, when an email notification popped up in the corner of my screen. Subject: Confirmation of updates. Voss family property file. Sender: Nora Plyrod, Harbor Title, com. I frowned. I did not know anyone at Red Harbor Title. We had closed on our house 3 years ago through a completely different agency, and we had not bought or sold anything since. I opened the email. Dear Mrs. Voss Hall, thank you for your prompt submission of the updated signature pages regarding the Voss family property file, Refshe 992B. Your documents have been processed, and the file is now flagged as active. If you have any further addendums, please submit them by the end of the quarter. Sincerely, Automated Client Services, Red Harbor. Title and Trust. I stared at the screen. Mrs. Voss Hall. I never used that formulation. I kept my maiden name professionally, and socially I was just Hazel Voss. I picked up my phone and dialed the number listed in the email footer. Red Harbor Title. This is Sarah speaking. Hi, this is Hazel Hall. I just received an email about a property file update, but I think there has been a mistake. I did not send you anything. There was a pause, the sound of typing. Oh, hello, Mrs. Voss Hall. Let me pull up the reference number. I waited, tapping my pen against the desk. Yes, here it is. The receptionist said, The Voss family property file. It looks like we received the digital packet this morning. It was flagged urgent, so the system sent the confirmation automatically. Who sent it? I asked. It came through the authorized portal. From the primary account holder. And who is that? Well, Marlene Voss. Of course. My stomach gave a little lurch. Marlene. Okay, I said, keeping my voice professional. And what exactly was in this packet? Why was my name on it? The receptionist hesitated. I cannot disclose the full contents over the phone without verification, but it looks like standard consolidation paperwork. Your signature was on the spousal consent forms and the waiver. Waiver? I asked. What waiver? I really should not say more. You would have to check with your husband or Mrs. Voss, but everything looks in order on our end. I hung up. The office air conditioner hummed loudly, but I felt a bead of sweat trickle down my back. Updates. Urgent. Waiver. I called Ethan immediately. He answered on the third ring, sounding breathless. Hey, honey. Everything okay? Ethan, I said, skipping the pleasantries. Do you know anything about a file at Red Harbor Title? The silence on the other end was instantaneous and heavy. It lasted 2 seconds, but it felt like an hour. Red Harbor? He asked, his voice pitching up slightly. Why do you ask? Because I just got a confirmation email thanking me for signing documents I've never seen. Marlene sent them. What is going on? I heard him exhale. Oh, that. Yeah. Mom mentioned she was doing some housekeeping, consolidating some of the old family trust stuff to save on administrative fees. It is probably just some back-end paperwork. Housekeeping? Ethan, the woman on the phone mentioned a waiver, and she said my signature was on it. I did not sign anything. Ethan laughed, but it was a nervous, brittle sound. You know how Mom is. She probably just attached some old forms to the new file to keep the records complete. It is nothing new. She is just obsessed with organizing the estate before Dad fully retires. Ethan, I said, pressing the phone harder against my ear. Did you know she was doing this? Look, Hazel, I have to run into a meeting. It is really boring administrative stuff. Do not worry about it. We can talk later, okay? He hung up. He hung up on me. Ethan never hung up on me when I was asking questions. He was the man who would stay on the phone for 20 minutes debating which Thai place to order from. My project lead instincts kicked in. The pattern was wrong. The data did not fit. Marlene ignoring me at a party was one thing. Marlene moving legal documents with my name on them was something else entirely. I could not focus on work for the rest of the day. 2 days later, on a Thursday evening, I told Ethan I was going to yoga. Instead, I drove to Larkspur Ridge. Larkspur Ridge was the name of the estate where Ethan grew up, and where Marlene and Graham Voss still lived. It was a sprawling, ivy-covered manor set back from the road on 6 acres of manicured lawn. It was beautiful, imposing, and cold. I had a casserole dish in the back seat. My excuse. I had borrowed it for a potluck weeks ago and conveniently forgotten to return it. I pulled my car into the long, circular driveway. The house was lit up, golden light spilling onto the snow-dusted hedges. Marlene's car was there. Graham's was not. I walked up the stone steps and reached for the heavy brass knocker, but I stopped. The front door was slightly ajar. Just a crack. Marlene often left it open for the cleaning staff or deliveries. I pushed it open gently. Hello? I called out softly. No answer. I stepped into the foyer. The house smelled of lemon polish and old wood. I heard a voice coming from the library down the hall. It was Marlene. I walked quietly across the oriental rug. I intended to announce myself, to walk in and say, "Hi, just dropping this off," but then I heard my name. No, she won't suspect anything, Marlene was saying. Her voice was low, impatient. I stopped breathing. I stood just outside the library door, pressing myself against the wall. She is focused on her little job, Marlene continued. She does not even know what she signed. I handled it. A pause. She was listening to someone on the other end. Stop worrying. Ethan, just keep her happy. Buy her something nice. The transfer is already in motion. If we wait, we lose the window. Ethan. She was talking to Ethan. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. No, Marlene snapped. She is not a victim. She is a liability. We are protecting the future. Now goodbye. I heard the click of the phone being set down on the receiver. I turned and ran. I did not care about the noise. I ran out the front door, down the steps, and into my car. I threw the casserole dish onto the passenger seat and reversed out of the driveway. my hands shaking so hard I could barely grip the wheel. Liability, protecting the future, transfer in motion. And Ethan knew. Stop worrying, Ethan. He was in on it. I drove to a parking lot behind a grocery store 3 miles away and parked. I turned off the engine and sat in the dark, hyperventilating. Think, Hazel. Think. She doesn't even know what she signed. What had I signed? I pulled out my phone. I opened the shared cloud folder Ethan and I used for household documents. It was where we kept tax returns, insurance policies, and digital copies of our IDs. I scrolled through the folders. 2023, 2024, tax docs, medical. I went into the medical folder. I was looking for anything that might have been repurposed. Marlene had said, she doesn't even know. That implied I had physically signed something. But under false pretenses, I scrolled back. 2 years ago, I saw a file labeled Release Forms, Surgery. I remembered that week. I had undergone emergency gallbladder surgery. It had been a blur of pain, anesthesia, and nausea. I remembered waking up in the private room Marlene had insisted on paying for. I remembered Ethan being there, looking pale. I remembered Marlene being there, smiling, holding a stack of papers. Just insurance forms, dear, she had said. We need to get these signed so the billing goes through the family plan correctly. I had been groggy. I had been on high-dose painkillers. I had signed where she pointed. I opened the PDF on my phone. It was a scan. The first 3 pages were standard hospital liability waivers, but the fourth page was different. The font was slightly smaller. The header was cut off in the scan, as if it had been folded over. But my signature was there, shaky and weak, at the bottom, and above my signature, in fine print. Estate Planning Addendum, Spousal Acknowledgement. I zoomed in. The text was dense legalese, but certain phrases jumped out. Irrevocable consent, waiver of claim, asset reclassification. I had not signed insurance papers. I had signed away rights to something I did not even know existed. I drove home. Ethan was in the kitchen when I walked in. He was cooking pasta, a glass of red wine on the counter. He looked up and smiled, but the smile faltered when he saw my face. Hey, he said, how was yoga? I did not go to yoga, I said. I walked over to the counter and placed my phone down. Face up. The document was on the screen. I went to your mother's house. Ethan. Ethan went still. The wooden spoon in his hand stopped moving. I heard her on the phone with you. I said, I heard her say, I am a liability. I heard her say, I do not know what I signed. Hazel. Ethan started, putting the spoon down. I held up a hand. Do not lie to me. Not right now. If you lie to me right now, I am walking out that door and I am not coming back. Ethan looked at me. His face crumbled. The dashing but confident man from the GALA dissolved, leaving behind a scared boy. Did I sign this? I asked, pointing to the phone. Did she make me sign an estate document while I was on morphine? Ethan closed his eyes. He gripped the edge of the granite countertop until his knuckles turned yellow. It is not what you think, he whispered. Is that my signature? Yes. Did I know what it was? No. Why? I asked, my voice cracking. Why? Ethan, we are married. I pay the mortgage on this house. I take care of us. Why are you helping her steal from me? Or whatever this is? It is not stealing, Ethan shouted, his eyes snapping open. It is complicated. Mom just likes to keep everything organized. She was worried about the volatility of the market. She wanted to make sure the core assets were ring-fenced. By tricking me? She did not want to worry you. Hazel, she thinks you are... He stopped. She thinks I am what? Ethan looked away. He could not say it. But I knew. She thought I was an outsider, a gold digger, someone to be managed, not trusted. His voice cracked. I did not want to do it. Hazel, I swear, she pushed. She said it was for our own good. For our good? Or for hers? Ethan didn't answer. He slumped against the counter, looking defeated. I looked at him, really looked at him, and realized I did not know the man standing in my kitchen. He was not my partner. He was her son. I picked up my phone. "I'm going to bed," I said quietly. "Hazel, wait. Do not follow me. Ethan, do not speak to me." I walked upstairs to the guest room and locked the door. I sat on the bed in the dark, my heart racing like a trapped bird. I did not scream. I did not cry. A cold clarity was settling over me, displacing the shock. Marlene Voss had humiliated me in public to lower my social standing. She had tricked me into signing legal documents to strip me of my rights. She was moving money, hiding assets, and using my husband as her pawn. She thought she had won. She thought I was just Ethan's friend, a naive woman who would sign whatever was put in front of her and smile for the camera while being pushed out of the frame. She was wrong. I opened my laptop. I created a new folder. Password protected. I named it the Voss file. I started typing. December 12th. GALA snub. Narrative establishment. Friend companion. December 19th. Red Harbor email. Discovery of secret file. December 21st. Overheard conversation. Confirmation of coercion. Document 1. The surgery signature. I looked at the glowing screen. The disrespect wasn't just snobbery. It was a cover operation. She was hiding something massive, something worth $4 million or more, and she needed me powerless to keep it safe. I was not going to confront her. Not yet. Confrontation now would just make her close ranks. I needed to be smarter. I needed to be quiet. I would find out what I signed. I would find out where the money was going, and I would find out why Marlene Voss was so terrified of me that she had to drug me to get my signature. I closed the laptop. The game had started years ago. I just hadn't known I was playing. Now I knew, and it was my turn to move. The waiting room of Dara Klein's law office was quiet, smelling faintly of old coffee and fresh printer paper. It was tucked away on the second floor of a brick building on Main Street, far enough from the high-rises of downtown Briar Glen to feel discreet, which was exactly why I had chosen it. I did not want a shark from a massive firm. I wanted someone who understood how this town worked, someone who knew that in Briar Glen, the most dangerous weapon was not a gun, but a notarized document. Dara Klein was a sharp-featured woman in her late 40s with glasses perched on the end of her nose and a skepticism that seemed etched into her very posture. She sat across from me at a mahogany desk that was covered in organized chaos, studying the photo I had taken of the signature page on my phone. She zoomed in, her eyes narrowing. "So, let me get this straight," Dara said, her voice dry. "You do not remember signing this." "I remember signing insurance forms." I said, "I was 2 hours post-op from gallbladder surgery. I was on a morphine drip. My mother-in-law told me it was routine billing paperwork." Dara hummed, a low vibration in her throat. She set the phone down and looked at me. "This header here," she said, pointing a pen at the screen. "Estate planning addendum. That is not hospital paperwork. Mrs. Hall." "I know." I said, "That is why I am here. Can you tell what it is attached to?" "Not from just this page," she said. "It is a signature page. It could be attached to a deed transfer. It could be attached to a power of attorney. It could be attached to a permission slip for a field trip. Though I doubt it. The problem is, your signature is there, and it is notarized." I leaned forward. "How can it be notarized?" There was no notary in the hospital room, just Marlene and Ethan. Dara gave me a grim smile. In circles like the Voss family moves in, notaries are often people who know which side of the bread holds the butter. A signature can be witnessed after the fact if you know the right people. It is not legal, strictly speaking, but proving it is a nightmare. She leaned back in her chair, tapping the pen against her chin. "This page alone is dangerous. Hazel, it is a blank check for consent. If she attaches this to a document waiving your rights to marital assets, and you try to contest it later, she pulls this out. It looks like you agreed." I felt a cold shiver crawl up my spine. "So what do I do?" "You need the full packet," Dara said firmly. "You said this was filed with Red Harbor title and trust?" Yes. Then you need to request a full copy of the file, not an update, not a summary, the full, certified execution copy. Can you request it for me? I can, Dara said, but if I send a formal request on letterhead, it fires a warning shot. If your mother-in-law is hiding something, she will know you have lawyered up the second my fax hits their machine. If you want to see what is in there before she has a chance to shred it or bury it, you need to ask for it yourself. Act confused. Act efficient. Do not act suspicious. I left her office with a plan, but my stomach was in knots. The confirmation that this was not just paranoia, that a lawyer saw real danger in that single page, made the ground feel unstable beneath my feet. The next morning, I called Red Harbor Title and Trust again. I sat in my car in the parking lot of Norwood and Pike, the engine running to keep the heater blasting against the biting Massachusetts chill. Red Harbor Title. This is Sarah. Hi, Sarah. This is Hazel Voss Hall again, I said, forcing a cheerful lilt into my voice. I spoke to you the other day about the Voss family property file. Oh, yes, Mrs. Voss Hall. How can I help? I was trying to update my personal records. I lied smoothly. My husband and I are meeting with our financial planner next week, and he insists on seeing the full execution copies of everything we have filed recently. You know how thorough these tax guys are. Could you send over the full PDF of the file? Not just the confirmation, but the actual documents? There was a pause. I heard the clicking of a mouse. I see the file here, Sarah said slowly. The thing is, Mrs. Voss Hall, this file has some access restrictions. Restrictions? I asked, my grip tightening on the steering wheel. I am the spouse. My signature is on it. Yes, I see that. But looking at the cover sheet, Marlene Voss is listed as the authorized family liaison. You are listed as… Let me see here. She trailed off. Listed as what? I pressed. You are categorized as spouse with limited disclosure, Sarah said. Her voice sounded apologetic, but also confused. I do not see that tag very often. Usually, it is for situations where there is a distinct separation of family assets, like a prenuptial hold, limited disclosure. The phrase hung in the air like smoke. It sounded polite, bureaucratic even, but I knew what it meant. It meant I was a guest in my own marriage. It meant I was an employee who did not have security clearance. Does that mean I cannot see the document I signed? I asked, letting a little bit of steel enter my voice. Well, technically, you are entitled to anything with your signature on it, Sarah said. But the protocol here says I have to notify the liaison before releasing the full packet to a limited party. I closed my eyes. If she notified Marlene, the game was up. Sarah, I said, dropping my voice to a conspiratorial whisper. Between you and me, my mother-in-law is incredibly particular. If she thinks I am bothering her with administrative stuff, she has already handled. She is going to give me a lecture about efficiency that will last through next Christmas. Is there any way you can just send it to me? It is my signature. After all, I just need to print it for the tax guy. Sarah hesitated. I could hear the indecision in the silence. She was likely a young administrative assistant, probably underpaid, probably terrified of high-maintenance clients like the Vosses. I suppose since it is your signature, it is fine, she said finally. I will email it to the address on file, but please do not mention it to Mrs. Voss. I do not want to get flagged for skipping protocol. You are a lifesaver. Sarah, thank you. I hung up and waited. 2 minutes later, my phone pinged, a secure PDF attachment. I forwarded it immediately to Dara Klein without opening it. I did not want to read it alone. I wanted a translator. That Sunday, we went to Larkspur Ridge for lunch. It was a monthly obligation. The entire extended Voss clan would gather in the formal dining room, a cavernous space with dark green wallpaper and oil paintings of ancestors who looked like they had died of constipation. The atmosphere was always stifling, but today it felt toxic. I wore a gray cashmere sweater and black trousers, trying to look armor-clad. Ethan was nervous. He had been jumpy all week, checking his phone constantly, jumping when the doorbell rang. He kept touching my arm, a nervous tick that usually meant he was seeking reassurance, but today it felt like he was checking to see if I was still there. We sat at the long mahogany table. Marlene was at the head. Of course, Graham, my father-in-law, was at the opposite end. Ethan and I were on one side. And across from us sat Aunt Liv and Uncle Peter, two distant relatives who seemed to exist solely to drink Graham's wine and agree with Marlene's opinions. The soup was served, a cold cucumber bisque that tasted like liquid indifference. "So," Marlene said, dabbing her mouth with a linen napkin. "How is work? Hazel? Still consulting?" She made the word consulting sound like racketeering. "It is going well. Thank you." I said, "We just closed a large implementation project for a hospital network in Boston." Marlene smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. Fascinating. "It must be so tiring, chasing after clients. I always tell Ethan how lucky we are that the Foundation's endowment manages itself. For the most part, it allows us to focus on what matters, and what matters is the community." Aunt Liv chimed in, nodding vigorously. "Precisely." Marlene said, "Stewardship, protecting what has been built so it can do good." She turned her gaze to Ethan. "I was telling Senator Miller the other night. Ethan, how proud I am of the way you are handling the transition. It takes a strong character to understand the weight of legacy. Some men let themselves be swayed by outside influences. They let people whisper in their ears. But you have always been responsible enough not to let outsiders steer family assets." The word outsiders landed on the table with the weight of a brick. She did not look at me when she said it. She looked at Ethan, but the implication was so loud it was practically shouting. I was the outsider. I was the influence. I was the one who needed to be kept away from the steering wheel. Ethan cleared his throat, looking down at his soup. "I am just doing my part. Mom, it is more than that." Marlene pressed, "It is about loyalty. You know, Graham was saying just yesterday how important it is that we keep our circle tight. The world is getting so grasping. People see the Voss name, and they see dollar signs. They do not see the history. They do not see the burden. They just want a piece of the pie." I gripped my spoon. She was talking about me as if I were a stranger who had wandered in off the street with a beggar's cup. "I think Hazel works very hard," Graham said from the end of the table. I looked at my father-in-law. Graham Voss was a quiet man, with thinning hair and a face that always looked tired. He had been kind to me, in his way, but he was a shadow in his own house. "Thank you, Graham," I said. Marlene turned her head slowly to look at her husband. "Oh, nobody is saying she does not work hard. Graham, we are just talking about the difference between earning a wage and managing a legacy. They are two very different skill sets. One is transactional, the other is permanent." She took a sip of wine. "Hazel, dear," she said, turning back to me, "did you enjoy the gala? I am sorry we did not get more time to chat. It gets so chaotic with the photographers. She was baiting me. She wanted me to snap. She wanted me to bring up the photo snub so she could call me petty in front of Liv and Peter. It was a lovely event." "Marlene," I said, keeping my voice level, "the flowers were beautiful." Marlene looked disappointed for a fraction of a second, then smoothed her expression. "Yes, they were expensive, but quality always is." After lunch, the men retired to the study for brandy, a ridiculous tradition that Marlene insisted on maintaining. I helped clear the table, not because I had to, but because I needed to do something with my hands. I found Graham in the kitchen, pouring himself a glass of water. He looked startled to see me. "Graham," I said, stepping closer, "can I ask you something?" He sighed, his shoulders slumping. He knew. I could see it in his eyes. He knew something was wrong. "What is it? Hazel? I got an email from Red Harbor Title the other day about a property file. Marlene seems to be the liaison for it. Do you know what she is moving around?" Graham looked at the water in his glass. He swirled it, watching the vortex. "Your mother-in-law handles the details." "Hazel," he said, "I stepped back from the daily administration years ago. It was easier, I asked. "Graham," She has me listed as a limited disclosure spouse. That does not sound like standard administration. That sounds like she is locking me out. Graham looked up at me. His eyes were sad and watery. Marlene has her ways of protecting the family, he said softly. She believes she is doing the right thing. She always believes she is doing the right thing. But is it the right thing? I asked. Or is it just control? Graham set the glass down. He looked at the door to make sure we were alone, then leaned in slightly. There are things about this family's finances that are complex. Hazel, old structures. Marlene keeps them standing. If I were you, I would just let her have her files. It is not worth the war. I fought her on the trust structure 10 years ago. I lost. It is better to just have peace. He walked out, leaving me standing next to the stack of dirty dessert plates. He wasn't malicious. He was beaten. He had surrendered to Marlene decades ago, and he expected me to do the same. Later that afternoon, back in the living room, I saw Ethan's phone light up on the coffee table. He was in the bathroom. Incoming call. Stonegate Fidelity Group. I stared at it. It rang 4 times, then went to voicemail. 2 minutes later, it rang again. Ethan came back into the room, saw the phone, and practically dove for it. He snatched it up, his face draining of color. I have to take this, he stammered. It is work. Work? I asked. On a Sunday? Yeah. Big deal closing. Sorry. He hurried out onto the patio, sliding the glass door shut behind him. I watched him through the glass. He was pacing, gesturing wildly with his free hand. He looked terrified. Stonegate Fidelity Group. I memorized the name before we left. I went to the mudroom to get our coats, on the side table, where the mail was stacked for sorting. I saw a thick envelope. It was addressed to Mr. Ethan Voss, but the address was Larkspur Ridge, not our home address. The return address was Stonegate Fidelity Group, P.O. Box 449, Boston, M.A. Why was his financial mail coming here? And why was he so afraid to answer their calls in front of me? The next day, Dara Klein called me. I reviewed the packet. She said, her voice was grave, "You need to come in, now." I sat in Dara's office for the second time in 3 days. This time, there was no chaotic desk. The desk was clear except for a thick stack of papers clipped together. Dara looked at me over her glasses. "It is worse than I thought," she said. "Tell me," I said, bracing myself. "Okay, so that signature page you found? It was attached to 2 documents. The first is a post-nuptial agreement." "A post-nup?" I said. "I never signed a post-nup." "According to this, you did," Dara said, tapping the stack. "Dated 2 years ago. The terms are draconian. It essentially waives your right to any appreciation of marital assets. It states that any increase in Ethan's net worth, even if it occurs during the marriage, remains sole and separate property of the Voss family lineage. I felt sick. So if we divorce, I get nothing? You get what you came in with, which is your salary, but the house, the investments, the growth of the portfolio, you get 0. She flipped the page. But that is not the worst part. The second document is a voluntary waiver of community interest. Now, Massachusetts is an equitable distribution state, not a community property state. This waiver is legally sloppy. It references statutes that do not even apply here. It looks like it was cut and pasted from a generic template or drafted by someone who is not a specialist. "So it is invalid?" I asked, feeling a spark of hope. "It is sloppy," Dara corrected. "But it is designed to intimidate. It is designed to make you think you have no rights. But here's the kicker. These documents route all of Ethan's future inheritance and current distributions into a specific vehicle." She pointed to a paragraph in the middle of the page. "The Voss Meridian Trust. I have never heard of that." I said, "I am not surprised." Dara said, "It is a family-controlled trust. And look at this clause here. Clause 14b. I leaned in and read the tiny text. "Distributions to the beneficiary, Ethan Voss, are contingent upon the beneficiary and his spouse maintaining good public standing. Any act of public disparagement, legal contest, or reputational harm caused by the spouse, shall result in an immediate freeze of all distributions and a forfeiture of the beneficiary's discretionary income for a period of no less than 5 years. I sat back, stunned. She weaponized his inheritance, I whispered. Exactly, Dara said. If you speak up, if you sue, if you leave him and make a fuss, Ethan loses his money. She has taken him hostage to keep you in line. She is not just protecting the money from you, she is using the money to turn him into your jailer. I drove home in a daze. The pieces were fitting together, forming a picture so ugly I could barely look at it. The friend comments, the outsider jabs, the secrecy. It was all part of a cage she had built, bar by bar, using Ethan's weakness as the welding torch. I walked into our house. It was dark. Ethan was sitting on the couch, the TV off, a glass of whiskey in his hand. He looked up when I entered. We need to talk, I said. I turned on the overhead light. It was harsh, unflattering. It stripped away the shadows. I went to Dara Klein, I said, tossing my purse onto the chair. I saw the packet. Ethan, the postnup, the waiver, the Voss Meridian Trust. Ethan flinched as if I had thrown a rock at him. He set the whiskey down, his hand trembling. Hazel, please. Clause 14b, I said, my voice rising. Public disparagement. If I say a word against her, she cuts you off. That is it, isn't it? That is why you are so scared. Ethan put his head in his hands. He made a sound that was half sob, half groan. She made me, he whispered. She made you trick your drugged wife into signing away her rights? I asked. How? Ethan? How does a mother make her son do that? He looked up. His eyes were red-rimmed and desperate. 3 years ago, he said, before we got married. I made a mistake. What kind of mistake? I tried to launch a venture, a tech startup with a guy I met in college. I wanted to prove I could make money without the foundation. I wanted to be independent. And it was a scam, he said, his voice breaking. The guy vanished. I lost a lot of money. Money I had borrowed against my future trust distributions. I was in debt. Hazel, massive debt. If the board had found out, I would have been removed from the succession plan. I would have been ruined. I stared at him. And you went to her. I had to. She was the only one who could fix it. She covered the debt. She paid it off so no one would know. But she said there was a price. The price was me, I said flatly. She said I had shown poor judgment. Ethan said, tears spilling onto his cheeks. She said I was vulnerable to predators. She said if I wanted her help, I had to let her secure the family assets. She demanded the postnup. She demanded the trust controls. She said it was temporary. Until I proved myself. Temporary? I laughed. A harsh, bitter sound. Ethan. She updated the file last week. She is not loosening the leash. She is tightening it. I did not know she would go this far. Ethan cried. I told her the postnup was just for show. I told her I would never file it. It does not matter if you file it, I shouted. She has it. She has it in a file at Red Harbor Title, notarized and ready to destroy me if I ever try to leave you. You gave her the gun, Ethan, and you put my fingerprints on it. I thought it would protect us. No, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. You thought it would protect you. You sold me out to save your reputation. Ethan reached for me, but I stepped back. I looked at him. This man I had loved. This man I had supported, paid bills for, cooked for. I saw the fear in him, but I also saw the cowardice. He was a man who would rather let his mother cannibalize his wife than face his own failures. I did not scream. The anger that had been burning hot all week suddenly cooled into something hard and sharp, like a diamond. I turned away from him and walked to the window. I looked out at the dark street. Sleep in the guest room. I said, Hazel, baby, please, sleep in the guest room. Ethan, or leave. Those are your choices. He stood there for a long moment, breathing raggedly. Then he turned and walked out of the room. I heard his footsteps going up the stairs, heavy and slow. I stayed by the window. I watched the snow begin to fall, covering the driveway in a clean white sheet. Humiliation. That was what she dealt in. She humiliated me at the gala. She humiliated Ethan by holding his failure over his head. She humiliated Graham by taking his power. She thought she was untouchable because she held the purse strings. She thought she could control us all because we were afraid of losing the money, the status, the Voss family legacy, but she had made a mistake. She had assumed I was like them. She assumed I was afraid of losing things I never really had. I was not afraid. I was furious. I went to my laptop and opened the folder. Target 1, the Voss Meridian Trust. Target 2, Red Harbor Title Trust. Target 3, Stonegate Fidelity Group. Who was calling Ethan? Why was the mail going to Marlene's house? Why was the trust explicitly penalizing disparagement? People only build walls that high when they are hiding something rotten in the basement. Ethan said she fixed his debt. She paid it off. But where did the money come from? Graham said he stepped back years ago. The foundation's endowment managed itself. I remembered the vendor names in the Red Harbor file. I remembered the urgency. I was going to find out where the money came from. I was going to follow the paper trail that Marlene had tried so hard to hide. She wanted to treat me like an outsider? Fine, I would be the outsider. I would be the one standing outside the house, watching, waiting, and finding the loose brick that would bring the whole thing crashing down. The humiliation ended tonight. The investigation began now. The days following my discovery of the post-nuptial agreement were defined by a terrifying, electric kind of silence. I did not move out. I did not scream at Ethan again. I simply stopped being his wife and started being his auditor. I slept in the guest room. I spoke to him only about logistics, and when he left for work, I went to war. I needed to understand the mechanics of the trap. A legal document is just paper until money moves through it. Marlene had forced Ethan to sign a waiver, but waivers are defensive. I needed to find the offense. I needed to find the active flow of cash that justified the existence of something as complex as the Voss Meridian Trust. It started on a Tuesday. While Ethan was in the shower, I knew his passwords. He was a creature of habit, using variations of his high school mascot and his birth year for everything. I opened his laptop and logged into his primary email, then navigated to the trash folder. Ethan was sloppy. He deleted things he wanted to hide, thinking delete meant destroy. I found a notification from Stonegate Fidelity Group. It was a statement alert, dated 3 days prior. I clicked the link. It auto-filled his credentials. The screen loaded, displaying a dashboard for an account I had never seen before. It was not a savings account. It was a brokerage account. But the activity feed was strange. There were no stock purchases, no mutual fund buy-ins. There was just a rhythmic, pulsing list of incoming and outgoing wire transfers. Every month, on the 15th, a deposit of $8,000 arrived from North Pine Advisory, and every month, on the 16th, a transfer of $8,000 went out to Meridian Reconciliation. I stared at the screen. Money in, money out. It was a pass-through. Ethan wasn't holding this money. He was washing it. He was a human pipeline, receiving funds from one entity and pushing them to another, likely to pay off the debt he had incurred years ago. But why call it Meridian Reconciliation? Meridian, the same word in the trust name, Voss Meridian Trust. I took screenshots of everything. Then I cleared the browser history, closed the laptop, and went to work, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Later that morning, I met Dara Klein at a coffee shop 2 towns over. I did not want to be seen near her office again. I slid the printed screenshots across the small metal table. "This is active," I said. "It is not just an inheritance vehicle. They are moving nearly $100,000 a year through an account in Ethan's name." Dara studied the papers, her face unreadable. North Pine Advisory. She read, "Generic name. Sounds like a shell." And Meridian Reconciliation? That implies paying back a ledger. Ethan told me he had a debt. I said, "He said Marlene fixed it. It looks like she is fixing it with someone else's money." Dara said, "If Marlene paid it off from her own pocket, there would be no need for this complex routing. This looks like structured repayment from a third-party source." "What do?" I asked. You need to know who Marlene Voss actually is, Dara said, leaning in. Not the society dame, the paper trail version. I want you to request your own comprehensive credit report and a full public records background check on yourself. On myself? You are married to him, Dara said. In the eyes of data aggregators, your financial identities are linked. Sometimes, when people try to hide assets, they attach them to the spouse's profile by mistake, or because they think you won't look. Request the raw data file from the credit bureaus. See what addresses or entities pop up that you do not recognize. I did it that afternoon. I paid an expedited fee to a background check service Dara recommended. The report was 50 pages long. Most of it was boring. My student loans, my car payments, our mortgage. But on page 42, under associated addresses and known aliases, there was a glitch in the matrix. Listed under my name, through familial association, was an address in Creston Vale, New Hampshire. I had never been to New Hampshire, and listed under associated business entities for the Voss family file was a dissolved company, Meridian Event Strategies, LLC. The registered agent for the LLC was not Marlene Voss. It was Marlene Sterling. Sterling, her maiden name. I searched for Meridian Event Strategies, LLC. It had been dissolved 5 years ago. The address matched the one in Creston Vale. It was a small commercial unit in a strip mall. Why would the queen of Briar Glen society, a woman who looked down on anything that wasn't a historic landmark, have a defunct event planning company in a strip mall in New Hampshire? I felt the pull of the thread. I had to pull it. I took a sick day on Wednesday. I told Ethan I had a migraine and locked the bedroom door. Then I climbed out the window, got in my car, and drove 2 hours north to Creston Vale. It was a dying mill town, the kind of place where the wind felt sharper and the buildings looked tired. I found the address. It was now a vape shop. I went into the local town clerk's office and asked for the business filing records. The clerk, a woman named Betty, who looked like she had seen everything and was impressed by none of it, handed me a microfiche printout. Meridian Event Strategies, formed 12 years ago, dissolved 5 years ago. Manager, Marlene Sterling. I needed a human connection. I looked up the old employees on LinkedIn, searching for anyone who had listed Meridian Event Strategies on their resume. Most were dead ends, but one profile stood out, Tessa Rowland. Executive Assistant, Meridian Event Strategies. She lived in a town 10 miles away. I found her number in the phone book. People in these towns still used landlines, and called her. I lied. I told her I was a freelance journalist writing a piece about successful women entrepreneurs in New England, and I wanted to ask about her time working with Marlene Sterling. There was a long silence on the other end. Marlene, Tessa said, her voice rough. You mean Mrs. Voss? Yes, I said, Mrs. Voss. I don't have anything to say to a journalist. She said, Wait, I said, dropping the act. Please, I am not a journalist. I am her daughter-in-law, and I think she is ruining my life. The silence stretched again, but the texture of it changed. It went from defensive to curious. Meet me at the diner on Route 9, Tessa said. Come alone. Tessa Rowland was a woman in her 40s with dyed red hair and eyes that were constantly scanning the room. She sat in a booth, shredding a paper napkin. When I sat down, she looked me up and down. You look like her type, Tessa said. Pretty, polished, quiet. I am not quiet anymore. I said, I ordered a coffee. Tessa, what was Meridian Event Strategies? Tessa laughed. A dry barking sound. It was a joke. That is what it was. We didn't plan events. We didn't book caterers. We didn't do flowers. What did you do? We processed invoices. She said, That's it. Mrs. Voss, or Marlene Sterling, as she liked to be called up here, would send us lists of names, donors, big shots, people who wanted to get their kids into the right schools or get on the right boards, and we would send them invoices for consulting services or event coordination. Tessa said they would pay the invoice. We would take the money, keep 5% for operations, and wire the rest to a holding account. Then we would write a letter of recommendation or make a phone call to some dean or board chair. I felt a chill. It was influence peddling. It was a clean front. Tessa continued. If anyone asked, the donors were just paying for strategic advice on philanthropy, but they were buying favors. Marlene was selling her reputation. She was selling access to the Voss name and the Caldwell Foundation. Why did it shut down? I asked. She got scared. Tessa said, about 5 years ago. She came in one day, shredded everything, and told us to go home. Said the liability was getting too high. She dissolved the LLC the next week. 5 years ago. That was right around the time Ethan tried to launch his startup. That was right around the time he crashed and burned. Did she ever mention North Pine Advisory? I asked. Tessa frowned. North Pine? Yeah, that was one of the big ones. They weren't a client, though. They were a partner. We used to route money to them when we needed to. Obscure the source. I had what I needed. Meridian wasn't just a business. It was a laundry machine. Marlene had been trading on the family name to collect cash from desperate social climbers, washing it through a fake company. And now she was using those same channels to clean up Ethan's mess. It wasn't cartoonishly illegal. It wasn't drug money. But it was fraud. It was tax evasion. It was reputation laundering. And if the Caldwell Civic Foundation knew their board chair was selling seats for cash, Marlene would be destroyed. I drove home in the dark. The pieces were locking into place. Marlene wasn't protecting the family legacy from me. She was using the family legacy to run a racket, and she had terrified Ethan into silence because he was the beneficiary of her crimes. 2 days later, we had to attend an engagement party for the daughter of a bank president. It was at the country club. I wore a red dress. I was done fading into the background. Marlene was there, holding court near the raw bar. When she saw me, her eyes narrowed slightly, but she smiled that terrible, tight smile. Hazel, she said, you decided to join us. I wouldn't miss it. I said. She turned to the woman standing next to her, a severe-looking woman with a diamond brooch. Cynthia. This is Ethan's wife, Hazel. She works in consulting. Cynthia nodded. Oh, consulting. That sounds interesting. Yes, Marlene said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. She is very good at it. She is used to spinning things. You know how consultants are. They take a simple truth and dress it up until you can't recognize it. It was a direct hit. She was calling me a liar in front of a stranger. She was planting the seed that I was untrustworthy, that my words were spin. I felt the heat rise in my cheeks, but I did not look away. Actually, Marlene, I said, my voice clear. I specialize in forensic auditing. I take complex messes and strip them down until the truth is the only thing left. Marlene's smile froze. Her eyes went dead flat. How charming, she said, and turned her back on me. I walked away, my hands trembling, but not from fear. I was done trying to win her over. I was done trying to be the good daughter-in-law. She wanted to play games with reputation? Fine. I knew where the bodies were buried. I started playing chess. The next week, I contacted the Caldwell Civic Foundation. I did not go through Marlene. I went through the volunteer coordinator, a sweet, overworked woman named Brenda. I told Brenda I had some free time and wanted to offer my professional skills to help streamline their operational budget. I can help you categorize expenses. I said, it is what I do for a living. I can probably save you 10% on administrative costs just by cleaning up the vendor list. Brenda nearly cried with relief. Oh, Hazel, that would be amazing. Mrs. Voss is always talking about how we need to be more efficient, but we just don't have the manpower. She gave me access, not to the bank accounts, but to the ledgers, the historic vendor payments. I sat in the dusty foundation office, surrounded by filing cabinets, and started digging. I went back 5 years. I found it. North Pine Advisory Partners. The foundation had paid North Pine Advisory Partners strategic retainer fees of $20,000 a month for 3 years. I checked the dates. The payments stopped exactly 1 month before the payments to Ethan's hidden Stonegate account began. It was a shell game. Marlene had siphoned money from the foundation to North Pine, parked it there, and was now dripping it back to Ethan to pay off his debts, labeling it Meridian Reconciliation to make it look like a loan repayment. She was stealing from the charity she chaired to cover her son's failures. I needed one more confirmation. I needed to know who pulled the strings at Stonegate. I took a lunch break and walked to the local branch of Stonegate Fidelity Group. It was a boutique investment firm, all glass and brushed steel. I walked up to the reception desk. I put on my best confused wife face. "Hi," I said. "My name is Hazel Voss. My husband, Ethan, has an account here, and we were trying to update our beneficiary information, but the online portal keeps giving us an error." The manager, a slick man in a blue suit, came over. "Mrs. Voss, please, come in. Let me see what I can do." I sat in his office. He typed on his keyboard. "Ah, yes," he said. "The Meridian account." "Right." I said, "The Meridian account. We just want to make sure I'm listed as the primary beneficiary. You know how these things get lost in the shuffle." He frowned at the screen. "Well, that might be the issue. The beneficiary field is locked at the administrative level." "Locked?" I asked. "Yes, it says here." The manager squinted. "We already have your spouse's beneficiary on file, per Mrs. Voss's instructions." "Mrs. Voss?" I asked, innocent. "Me?" "No," he said, looking up. "The other Mrs. Voss, Marlene. She is the trustee on the account. She has the only authorization to change beneficiary details." I felt the click. So, even if Ethan wanted to leave this money to me, he couldn't? Not without her signature. The manager said, "It is a highly restricted structure." "Thank you," I said, standing up. "That clarifies everything." I walked out. Marlene controlled the debt. She controlled the income. She controlled the inheritance. Ethan was a 34-year-old man on an allowance, and she was using stolen charity money to pay it. I went to Larkspur Ridge that evening. I knew Marlene was out at a bridge tournament. Graham would be home alone. I found him in the greenhouse, watering his orchids. The air was humid and smelled of earth. "Graham," I said. He jumped, nearly dropping the watering can. "Hazel, you startled me. We need to talk." "Graham, and this time, you are not going to tell me to let it go." I walked over to him. I saw the fear in his eyes. He was a good man. I thought, but a weak one. "I know about Meridian event strategies." I said, "I know about North Pine. I know she is funneling money from the foundation to pay for Ethan's mistakes." Graham's face went gray. He set the watering can down on the bench. His hands were shaking. "You dug too deep." "Hazel," he whispered, "someone had to." I said, "Graham, this is illegal. If the IRS looks at this, if the foundation board looks at this, she goes to prison. Ethan goes to prison." Graham closed his eyes. He looked suddenly very old. "She did it to save him." He said, "Ethan, he got involved with bad people. The debt wasn't just business debt. It was leverage. They were going to hurt him. Marlene had to come up with the money fast. She used the only channels she had. She is laundering money." "Graham, I know," he snapped, his voice echoing in the glass room. "I know what she is doing. Do you think I haven't tried to stop her?" "Then why didn't you?" "Because she won't stop," Graham said, looking at me with a terrifying intensity. "You do not understand her. Hazel, she built this family's reputation out of nothing. She reinvented herself to get here. If you expose her, she won't just surrender. She will burn everything to the ground before she loses. She will destroy Ethan. She will destroy you. She will torch the house with us inside it, rather than let the world see her fail." I looked at him. I saw the decades of fear he had lived under. "She can try," I said, but I brought a fire extinguisher. I left him standing among the orchids and drove home. Ethan was in the living room, watching sports, trying to pretend our marriage wasn't a smoking ruin. "Turn it off," I said. He looked at me, saw my face, and clicked the remote. The room went silent. "Hazel, I know about North Pine," I said. "I know about the transfers. I know about the kickbacks from the donors." Ethan went pale. He stood up, backing away from me. "You? How did you?" "It doesn't matter how. I know. And now, you are going to give me the rest. I am not asking. Ethan, I am telling you, If you want to stay married to me, if you want to stay out of jail, you are going to show me everything you have." Ethan looked at the door, then back at me. He looked like a trapped animal, but then something broke in him. The exhaustion of the lie finally outweighed the fear of his mother. He walked to the bookshelf. He pulled out a copy of Moby Dick, a book I knew he had never read. He opened it. The pages had been hollowed out. Inside was a USB drive and a small stack of folded papers. He handed them to me. His hand was trembling so hard the papers rattled. "I kept copies," he whispered, "just in case." "In case of what?" "In case she ever tried to cut me off completely." He said, "It is the proof. It is the emails. It is the original loan documents. I took the evidence." It felt heavy in my hand. "You are going to help me, Ethan," I said. "We are going to take this apart, brick by brick." He nodded, tears standing in his eyes. "Okay," he said. "Okay." I looked at the USB drive. I had the weapon. Now I just had to decide when to pull the trigger. Marlene Voss had spent her life building a fortress of lies. I was about to invite everyone she knew to watch it crumble. The USB drive Ethan had pulled from the hollowed-out book sat on the coffee table like a piece of radioactive material. It was small, black, and unassuming, but I knew that what was stored on its microchip had the power to dismantle a dynasty. Ethan sat on the edge of the sofa, his head in his hands, unable to look at it. "Open it," he whispered. "Please, just get it over with." I plugged the drive into my laptop. The screen flickered, then a file directory popped up. It was messy. Ethan was not an organizer, but the folder names were clear enough. Loan agreements, correspondence, urgent. I opened the folder labeled correspondence. There were dozens of emails, mostly PDF exports, of threads between Ethan, Marlene, and a man named Marcus Thorne. I recognized the name immediately. Marcus Thorne was the chief financial officer of the Caldwell Civic Foundation. He was a man I had shaken hands with at a dozen galas. A man who wore bow ties and spoke about fiscal responsibility with the reverence of a priest. I clicked on an email dated 5 years ago, November 14th, 2 days before Ethan's debt was magically cleared. From Marlene Voss to Marcus Thorne. Subject: Urgent allocation. Restricted pool B. Marcus, we have a liquidity issue on the private side that requires immediate resolution to prevent reputational exposure. I need an authorization for a transfer of $450,000 from the restricted donor pool B. We will structure it as a short-term bridge loan to Meridian Event Strategies for capital improvements on the venue project. I will backfill the pool from the Voss Trust distributions over the next 24 months. Do not run this through the general ledger yet. Use the discretionary override. Marlene, I read it twice, then I read it a third time, feeling a cold knot tighten in my stomach. Restricted donor pool B, I said aloud. Ethan looked up, his eyes red. What does that mean? It means she didn't pay your debt. Ethan, I said, turning the laptop so he could see. She stole it. Restricted funds in a nonprofit are legally bound. They are donations given for a specific purpose. Scholarships, building funds, disaster relief. To move them into a private LLC for a fake project was not just creative accounting, it was embezzlement. It was fraud. It was a felony that carried a prison sentence of 10 years or more. And she involved the CFO. I murmured, Marcus Thorne. He is in on it. He had to be, Ethan said miserably. Mom has him wrapped around her finger. She got him the job. I scrolled down. There was a reply from Thorne. Marlene, confirmed. The transfer is initiated to Meridian. Just ensure the paper trail for the venue project is robust in case of an audit. We cannot leave Pool B exposed for more than a quarter. I looked at the dates. The money went from the foundation to Meridian Event Strategies. Then, 2 days later, Meridian wired the exact same amount to the creditors holding Ethan's debt. She didn't use family money. I said, the realization hitting me with the force of a physical blow. She didn't use the Voss fortune. She used the charity. She used other people's money to clean up your mess. And then she spent the next 5 years laundering the repayment through your account so the foundation wouldn't notice the hole. I leaned back against the cushions, closing my eyes. This explained everything. It explained the complex trust structure. It explained the obsession with secrecy. But most of all, it explained why she hated me. She didn't hate me because I was middle class. She didn't hate me because I wore the wrong shoes or didn't know which fork to use. She hated me because I was a witness she hadn't chosen. If I ever got close enough to see the books, if I ever asked the right questions, her entire house of cards would collapse. The only way to keep me safe for her, was to make sure I had zero credibility. That was why she ignored me at parties. That was why she called me Ethan's friend. That was why she told board members I was used to spinning things. She was preemptively destroying my character. She was painting me as an outsider, a gold digger, a nobody, so that if I ever stood up and said, "Marlene Voss is a thief," everyone would laugh and say, "Oh, that is just the jealous daughter-in-law trying to grab a payout." It was not social snobbery. It was a tactical, preemptive strike on my reputation. "She is not protecting the family from me," I said, my voice hardening. "She is protecting herself from the truth, and she is using you as a shield." Ethan looked down at his hands. "I didn't know about the foundation money. Hazel, I swear, I thought she pulled it from her personal investment accounts. Ignorance is not a defense." "Ethan," I said, "not when your name is on the bank account that receives the wash payments." I spent the next morning with Dara Klein. We did not meet in coffee shops anymore. We met in her conference room with the blinds drawn. I laid it all out. The emails, the signature page, the flow of funds. Dara looked at the email printout. Her expression grim. "This is nuclear," she said. "If this gets out, the Caldwell Foundation is finished. The Attorney General will step in. The Voss family assets will be frozen. That is the leverage." I said, "It is dangerous leverage," Dara warned. "Hazel, you have to understand what you are holding. You are not just holding proof of a crime. You are holding a bomb that destroys the social fabric of this entire town. Marlene Voss is not just a wealthy woman. She is an institution. If you pull this thread, a lot of powerful people, Marcus Thorne, the board members who looked the other way, the bankers at Stonegate, are going to get hurt. I do not care about them." I said, "I care about getting my name off those documents. I want the postnup shredded. I want the waivers voided. And I want Ethan's inheritance untangled from her control. We need to build a fortress of facts." Dara said, "No speculation. We need a timeline that is unassailable." We spent 4 hours mapping it out on a whiteboard. Fact 1. Unauthorized use of Hazel's signature on estate documents. Fact 2. Existence of the Voss Meridian Trust with punitive control clauses. Fact 3. Transfer of restricted charitable funds to a dissolved shell company. Meridian Event Strategies. Fact 4. Laundering of funds through North Pine Advisory back to Ethan Voss. Fact 5. Marlene's direct control of Ethan's accounts at Stonegate. It looked clean on the whiteboard. It looked logical. But I knew that in the real world, logic often lost to power. I left Dara's office at 4 in the afternoon. My phone buzzed as I walked to my car. I pulled it out, expecting a text from Ethan asking when I would be home. It was a text from an unknown number, no area code, just a string of digits. "Stop digging. You are not family." I stopped in the middle of the sidewalk. The wind whipped my hair across my face, stinging my eyes. I looked around. The street was busy with afternoon traffic. People were walking into the bakery, coming out of the dry cleaners. Normal life. But someone was watching me. "Stop digging. You are not family." It was not a threat of violence, exactly. It was deeper than that. It was an identity threat. It was the same message Marlene had been broadcasting for 3 years, distilled into 6 words. "You do not belong. You are an intruder. Go away." I got into my car and locked the doors. My hands were shaking as I put the key in the ignition. Was it Marlene? It had to be. Or maybe Graham, trying to protect her? Or Marcus Thorne? My fear spiked, hot and sharp. But then, as I stared at the text, the fear began to curdle into something else. They were scared. You do not send anonymous threats to someone who is wrong. You send them to someone who is right. You send them to someone who is getting too close. I took a screenshot of the text and sent it to Dara. Then I typed a reply to the unknown number, knowing they wouldn't answer, but needing to say it. I am not going anywhere. I drove home. I did not turn on the radio. I needed to think. When I walked into the house, Ethan was pacing the living room. He looked even paler than usual. "You need to see this," he said, shoving his phone at me. I looked at the screen. It was an email from the Briar Glen Arts Conservatory. "Dear Ethan, we are thrilled to inform you that, upon the glowing recommendation of Marlene Voss, the nominating committee has selected you as the finalist for the open seat on the board of directors. This is a high-visibility role that continues the Voss legacy of arts patronage. We look forward to your confirmation at the holiday gala." I handed the phone back to him. "She is escalating." I said, "What?" Ethan asked. "It is just a board seat. I do not even want it. She knows you do not want it." I said, "That is not the point. She is putting you in the spotlight. She is locking you into the establishment. If you are on that board, you become a public figure in this town. And I become the board member's wife." It was a brilliant, twisted move. By elevating Ethan, she was elevating the walls around us. If I tried to expose her after he accepted a prestigious board seat, it would look like I was trying to sabotage his success. It would make me look bitter and destructive. She was using his success to trap me further in the narrative she controlled. "You cannot accept it." I said, "I have to," Ethan cried. "If I say no, she will know something is wrong. She will cut off the distributions. We will lose the house. Hazel, I cannot pay the mortgage without the trust allowance." I looked at him with pity. He was 34, and he was still afraid of his mother taking away his allowance. "We are not going to lose the house," I said, "because we are going to finish this before the holiday gala." The next day, I met Tessa Rowland again. I needed to understand the woman behind the curtain, the file at Red Harbor Title, the shell company, the fake invoices. It all pointed to a woman who was comfortable with deception. I met Tessa in a park in a neighboring town. It was cold, the sky the color of a bruised plum. We sat on a bench, watching children play on the swings. "Tessa," I said, "I need to ask you about the paperwork. When you were at Meridian, did you ever see Marlene's personal identification? Driver's license? Passport?" Tessa wrapped her coat tighter around herself. "We had to keep a file," she said. "For the bank compliance." Marlene hated it, but the bank insisted on a copy of the manager's ID. And it was weird. Tessa said the name on the driver's license was Marlene Sterling. Like she said. But one time, back in the beginning, we got a notice from the IRS, a payroll discrepancy. It said the Social Security number for the manager did not match the name. "What name did it match?" I asked. Tessa frowned, searching her memory. "It was years ago. We had to shred it, but I remember thinking it was funny because the first name was the same, Marlene, but the last name was Hatcher. Marlene Hatcher. Hatcher. And the birth date was different," Tessa added. "On her license, she was born in 1960, but on the IRS form, the birth date associated with the number was 1958, 2 years older." I thanked Tessa and drove straight to Dara's office. "Marlene Hatcher," I said, walking in without knocking. "Try that name." Dara typed it into her legal database. She narrowed the search parameters to New England. Extending back 40 years, nothing came up in Massachusetts, nothing in Connecticut. "Try New Hampshire," I said. "Creston Vale." Dara clicked the mouse. She scrolled. Then she stopped. Well, she whispered. "What? Civil case." Dara read, "Merrimack County Superior Court, dated 32 years ago. Hatcher v. Department of Revenue. It is sealed." "Sealed? Why?" "Usually, cases like that are sealed if they involve a settlement, or a minor, or a protection of a witness. But here's the interesting part. There is a cross-reference to a name change petition filed the same year. Marlene Hatcher petitioned to change her name to Marlene Sterling. And then, 6 months later, Marlene Sterling married Graham Voss. She reinvented herself. I said, "She wasn't just some debutante from a quiet family. She was Marlene Hatcher, and she was involved in a tax case with the Department of Revenue before she ever met Graham. She buried it," Dara said. "She sealed the case, changed her name, shaved 2 years off her age, and married into the Voss fortune. She created a character, and that is why she is so terrified of anyone looking at the paperwork." I realized, it is not just the theft from the foundation, it is the whole lie. If the Voss family found out she was a fraud, that she lied about who she was to get the ring, the legacy she is so obsessed with would evaporate. She would be nothing. I knew what I had to do. I had the documents, I had the fake name, I had the proof of theft. But documents were cold. I needed to look her in the eye. I needed to see if the woman who had made me feel small for 3 years could stand the weight of her own secrets. I drove to Larkspur Ridge. I did not call ahead. I walked up the steps and rang the bell. The housekeeper answered, looking surprised. "Is she home?" I asked. "Mrs. Voss is in the solarium." The housekeeper said. I walked through the house. The silence was heavy, oppressive. I found Marlene in the solarium, a glass-walled room at the back of the house filled with ferns and winter light. She was arranging white lilies in a crystal vase. She looked up as I entered. She did not smile. She did not pretend to be polite. "Hazel," she said, "to what do I owe the intrusion?" I stopped 10 feet away from her. I did not scream. I did not shout. I felt a strange, icy calm. "I know about the restricted donor pool, Marlene." Her hands stopped moving among the flowers. She did not turn around. "I beg your pardon? I know you used $450,000 of charitable funds from the Caldwell Foundation to pay off Ethan's debt. I know you routed it through Meridian Event Strategies, and I know you are using the trust to force Ethan to pay it back." Marlene turned slowly. Her face was a mask of porcelain perfection, but her eyes were alert, sharp as cut glass. "You have a vivid imagination. Hazel, I suppose this is what happens when you spend too much time with spreadsheets. You start seeing patterns that aren't there. I have the emails," I said. "I have the bank transfers, and I have the text message you sent me." "Stop digging," Marlene let out a short, dismissive laugh. "I do not send text messages. Dear, I have people for that." "So you admit it." "I admit nothing. I admit that my son married a woman who is woefully unequipped to understand the complexities of high-level finance." I took a step closer. "Why?" I asked. "Why the post-nup? Why the waiver? Why the humiliation at the parties? You could have just paid the debt and moved on. Why did you have to put a cage around my marriage?" Marlene picked up a pair of shears. She snipped a stem with a sharp snick. She looked at me, and for the first time, the mask slipped. I saw the fear beneath it. But it wasn't the fear of a victim. It was the fear of a predator who hears a twig snap. "Because I know what happens when women like you get greedy," she said softly. "Women like me?" I asked. "You mean working women? Middle-class women?" "I mean women who come from nowhere," she hissed. "Women who think that marrying a name gives them the right to own it. You think you are safe, Hazel. You think love protects you. But love is just a transaction, and when the money is at risk, people like you always grab for the checkbook. I had to ensure that when you eventually decided to cash out, you wouldn't take anything that belonged to the bloodline." I stared at her. She wasn't talking about me. She was talking about herself. She was Marlene Hatcher, the woman who came from nowhere, who changed her name, who hid her past, and who grabbed the checkbook. She had projected her own mercenary nature onto me. She assumed I was a thief because she was a thief. "You are not protecting the bloodline. Marlene," I said quietly, "you are protecting the lie." Marlene's eyes narrowed. "Get out of my house," she said. I turned and walked away. I heard the snick of the shears behind me, like a guillotine blade. I walked out to my car. My legs felt like jelly. I sat in the driver's seat and gripped the wheel, shaking. The adrenaline was crashing, leaving me cold and nauseous. She had threatened me. She had insulted me, but she had also confirmed it. She was terrified. I took a deep breath. I steadied my hands. She thought she could bully me into silence. She thought that by calling me greedy, by treating me like an interloper, she could shame me into backing down. But she had forgotten one thing. Sunlight is the best disinfectant. I wasn't going to sue her in a quiet courtroom where she could seal the records. I wasn't going to send a demand letter she could shred. I was going to the holiday gathering. It was in 3 days. Graham and Marlene's annual party. Every donor from the foundation would be there. Marcus Thorne would be there. The board of the Arts Conservatory would be there. The entire Voss clan would be there. It was the stage she had built to perform her role as the matriarch of Briar Glen. It was the place where she felt most powerful, and that was exactly where I was going to take her apart. I started the car. I wasn't shaking anymore. I was ready. The dining room table in my house was no longer a place for meals. It had become a command center. I had pushed the placemats and the centerpiece to the side, replacing them with a sprawling, terrifying map of the Voss family secrets. Dara Klein stood by the window, looking out at the gray December sky, while I organized the stacks of paper for the 10th time. "We have the timeline," I said, smoothing out a printout of the bank transfers. "We do," Dara said, turning to face me. "But Hazel, I need you to listen to me very carefully." I looked up. Her face was serious, stripped of her usual lawyerly cynicism. "We have proof of financial irregularities," Dara said. "We have proof of unauthorized signatures. We have a strong circumstantial case for embezzlement of charitable funds. But we do not have a verdict. We are not a court of law. I know that." I said, "If you walk into that party and call Marlene Voss a criminal, she will sue you for defamation before the dessert course is served." Dara warned. "She has the money to bury you in litigation for the next 10 years. She will claim the signatures were authorized verbally. She will claim the transfers were loans. She will claim you are a disgruntled wife trying to extort a settlement. So what am I supposed to do?" I asked. "Just let her get away with it?" "No," Dara said. "You do not accuse her of crimes. You present the facts that affect you. You stick to the documents that have your name on them. You ask questions that she cannot answer without lying or incriminating herself. You do not say, 'You stole money,' you say, 'Why is my signature on a document I never saw?' You do not say, 'You are laundering cash,' you say, 'Why is the charity paying a vendor that does not exist?'" I understood. It was a subtle distinction, but a vital one. I had to be the confused, diligent victim seeking clarity, not the prosecutor seeking a conviction. If I attacked, she would play the victim. If I asked for the truth, she would have to scramble to hide it. "I want the truth," I said. "I do not want chaos. I just want out of this web." Dara nodded. "Then keep your cool. If you get emotional, if you scream, you play right into her hands. She will paint you as hysterical. You have to be ice." I looked at the stack of papers, the email from Red Harbor Title, the printout of the North Pine advisory payments, the copy of the forged estate addendum. "I can be ice," I said. "I have had 3 years of practice freezing in her shadow. 2 nights before the big holiday gathering, we had to attend a pre-holiday dinner at a steakhouse in downtown Briar Glen. It was an intimate affair, just the immediate family and a few key board members from the conservatory. I wore a high-necked black dress. I felt like I was wearing mourning clothes for my marriage, which was currently existing in a state of suspended animation. Ethan sat next to me, jittery and silent. He drank his scotch too fast. Marlene sat at the head of the table, radiating that terrifying, manic energy she always had when she was controlling a room. She laughed too loudly at the board chairman's jokes. She touched Graham's arm with a performative affection that made my stomach turn. I sat there, cutting my steak into tiny, precise squares, saying nothing. Marlene ignored me completely. She did not ask about my work. She did not ask how I was. She simply looked through me, directing her conversation to the woman on her left, a wealthy donor named Mrs. Gable. "It is so important that we keep the conservatory focused on tradition," Marlene was saying. "In times like these, people are looking for stability. They want to know that the institutions they trust are being shepherded by people who understand the value of history." Mrs. Gable nodded enthusiastically. Oh, absolutely. Marlene, that is why we are so thrilled about Ethan joining the board. Marlene beamed at Ethan. Yes. Ethan knows the weight of his name. She raised her glass of red wine. The table quieted. I would like to propose a toast, Marlene said. Her voice was rich, commanding the attention of everyone in the private room. To family, she said. To the bonds that hold us together when the world tries to tear us apart. And to loyalty, real loyalty. Not the kind that is bought, but the kind that is born. She paused, letting her gaze drift around the table. For a split second, her eyes landed on me. It was a cold, hard look, devoid of humanity. We have to be careful, she continued, her voice lowering to a confidential murmur. We live in a time where people look at what we have built and they feel entitled to it. There are people who marry into comfort and then demand ownership. They mistake proximity for power, but we know the truth. We know that the legacy only survives if we protect it from those who would drain it dry. She smiled, a tight, predatory smile. To the Voss legacy. To the legacy, the guests murmured, raising their glasses. I raised my glass, but I did not drink. The wine looked like blood in the candlelight. She was doing it. She was priming the jury. She was planting the narrative that I was the enemy, the entitlement, the outsider, the drain. She was telling them, in code, that if I caused a scene, it was because I was greedy. Ethan looked down at his plate, his face burning. He knew. He heard it, but he said nothing. I looked at Marlene. She was taking a sip of wine, looking satisfied. She thought she had won the room. She thought she had inoculated them against me. But she had made a mistake by making the attack so specific, so pointed. She had revealed her hand. She wasn't just dismissing me anymore. She was campaigning against me. And you only campaign against an opponent you fear. After dinner, as the group moved toward the coat check, I saw Graham standing alone near the valet stand. He looked tired. His shoulders slumped under his heavy wool coat. Graham, I said softly, stepping up beside him. He flinched, then looked at me. His eyes were sad, rimmed with the exhaustion of a man who has spent 30 years keeping secrets. Hazel, he said, I need you to do something for me. I said. He looked at the floor. I cannot stop her. Hazel, I told you, I am not asking you to stop her. I said, I am asking you to witness her. He looked up, confused. On Saturday, at the gathering. I said, when I speak to her, when I ask her the questions I need to ask, I need you to promise me you will not leave the room. I need you to promise me you will not turn away. Graham swallowed hard. His Adam's apple bobbed. What are you going to do? He whispered. I am going to ask for the truth. I said, and I need you to be there to hear the answer. You owe me that. Graham, you watched her erase me for 3 years. The least you can do is watch her explain why. He looked at me for a long moment, then he nodded, a small, jerky motion. I will stay, he said. Thank you. The next morning, the pressure ramped up. I was in my home office, reviewing the file again. When my phone rang, it was Sarah from Red Harbor Title. Mrs. Voss Hall? She asked. Her voice sounded strained. Yes. Sarah, is everything okay? I do not know if I should be calling you. Sarah said, but you were so nice the other day, and something just happened that made me uncomfortable. What happened? I asked, sitting up straighter. We received a request this morning to update the Voss family property file again. Sarah said, it came from the liaison, from Mrs. Voss, and she requested a full expungement of the previous version history. Sarah said, she wanted to replace the spousal consent forms with new versions. She claimed the old ones were corrupted files and needed to be swapped out for clarity. My heart hammered against my ribs. She was trying to delete the evidence. She knew I had seen the email confirmation, and she was trying to scrub the record before I could pull the official packet. Did you do it? I asked. I have to process the request, Sarah said. But, well, I archived the old version on our localized server before I made the swap. Just in case, It seemed irregular. To delete a notarized history is not standard protocol. Sarah, I said, gripping the phone, do not delete that archive. Whatever you do, keep that original version safe. It might be the most important document in your entire system. I will, Sarah said. I just thought you should know. I hung up, my hands shaking. Marlene was moving fast. She was trying to paper over the cracks before the holiday party. She knew I was asking questions. She knew the walls were closing in. That evening, Ethan came home early. He looked like a ghost. He threw his briefcase on the floor and collapsed onto the sofa. She is telling the committee I am having marital problems, he said, staring at the ceiling. What? I asked, standing in the doorway. I got a call from Marcus Thorne. Ethan said he wanted to check in on me. He said Mom told the board nominating committee that you are going through a mental health crisis. She told them you are stressed, unstable, and paranoid. She said they should be patient with me because I am dealing with a volatile domestic situation. I felt a cold rage settle in my chest. It was the oldest trick in the book. If the wife speaks up, call her crazy. Call her unstable. She is discrediting you, Ethan said. She told them that if you say anything outbursts or make scenes, it is just the stress talking. She is setting it up so that no matter what you say, they will just look at you with pity and ignore you. I walked over to the window. I looked out at the snow. She is terrified. I said, How can you say that? Ethan asked, sitting up. She is destroying your reputation. She is panicking. Ethan, she is throwing everything she has at the wall to see what sticks. First I was greedy. Now I am crazy. She cannot decide which lie to tell. So she is telling all of them. I turned to face him, but she forgot one thing. What? I have the receipts. I said, You can call someone crazy all you want, but you cannot gaslight a bank statement. You cannot call a notarized signature paranoid. I spent the rest of the night practicing. I stood in front of the mirror in the guest room, rehearsing my lines. Marlene, why is there a trust clause that penalizes Ethan if I speak? Marlene, why did you open a shell company in New Hampshire under a name you haven't used in 30 years? Marlene, why did you sign my name to a waiver while I was unconscious? I stripped the emotion out of my voice. I practiced standing tall, keeping my hands still, keeping my face blank. I had to be a mirror. I had to reflect her ugliness back at her without absorbing it. The morning of the holiday gathering dawned bright and bitterly cold. The sky was a hard, brilliant blue. I was in the kitchen, drinking black coffee, when Ethan walked in. He was wearing his tuxedo trousers and a white undershirt. He looked like he hadn't slept. Hazel, he said. I looked up. There is something else. What else could there be? Ethan? I asked. I think we have hit the bottom of the barrel. No, he said. There is one more thing. I didn't tell you because I was ashamed. He pulled a chair out and sat down. 4 years ago, he said, right after she paid off the debt, she made me sign a private agreement. It is not in the trust. It is a side letter. What does it say? It says that I agree to keep the family financial structures completely segregated from you. Forever. It says that if I ever grant you access, or if I ever let you see the ledgers, the debt becomes immediately callable. Callable? I asked. She can demand full repayment of the $450,000, plus interest, immediately. If I show you the books, she bankrupts us. I stared at him. That is why you were so evasive, I said. That is why you hid the mail. That is why you wouldn't talk to me about the trust. You weren't just protecting her. You were protecting yourself from bankruptcy. I thought it would protect you, too, Ethan said, his voice cracking. I thought if I just kept you in the dark, she would leave you alone. I thought she would be satisfied if she had the control. But I was wrong. It didn't protect you. It just gave her permission to treat you like garbage. I looked at my husband. I saw the fear that had defined his entire adult life. He had been living with a gun to his head, holding the hand of the woman holding the trigger. It is okay. Ethan, I said, how is it okay? He asked. If you do this today, if you expose her, she will call the debt. She will ruin us. Let her try. I said, the money she used to pay that debt was stolen from a charity. If she tries to sue us for it, she has to admit where it came from. She cannot call a debt that was paid with embezzled funds. It is a stalemate." Ethan looked at me, hope flickering in his eyes. "You really think so?" "I know so." I said, "She trapped herself. Ethan, she just doesn't know it yet." I went upstairs to get dressed. I chose a dress I had bought specifically for this day. It was deep emerald green, structured and sharp. It was not a dress for fading into the background. It was a dress for taking up space. But before we left, I made one phone call. "Tessa?" I said when she answered. "Hazel," she said, "I thought you might call. I need you to come to the party." I said. There was a silence on the line. "You want me to come to Larkspur Ridge?" Tessa asked. "Into the lion's den?" "I do not want you to say anything." I said, "I do not want you to make a scene. I just want you to be there. I am bringing you as my guest. Why? Because you are the living proof of the lie." I said, "You knew her as Marlene Sterling. You knew her when she was running the shell company. If she tries to deny it, if she tries to say I am making it up, I need you to be standing there. I need her to look at you and know that the ghost has walked out of the wall." Tessa hesitated. I could hear her breathing. "She will hate it," Tessa said. "She will be furious." "I know." I said, "Will you come?" I heard the click of a lighter. Tessa exhaled smoke. "Pick me up in an hour," she said. I never liked her anyway. We arrived at Larkspur Ridge at 6 o'clock. The house was a blaze of light. Wreaths hung from every window, and the driveway was lined with luxury cars. Ethan drove. I sat in the passenger seat. Tessa was in the back, wearing a simple black dress and a coat that looked like it had seen better days, but her face was set in a grim line of determination. We parked. We walked up the stone steps. The door opened. The noise of the party spilled out. Laughter, the clink of glass, the sound of a string quartet playing Christmas carols. We walked in. The foyer was crowded with the elite of Briar Glen. I saw the mayor. I saw the bank president. I saw Marcus Thorne, holding a glass of champagne, looking smug. And in the center of it all, wearing a gown of shimmering silver, was Marlene. She was radiant. She was charming. She was holding the arm of a senator, laughing at something he had said. She turned as the cold air from the open door hit the room. Her eyes scanned the entrance. She saw Ethan. Her smile widened. She saw me. Her smile faltered, just a fraction, before reassembling itself into a mask of polite tolerance. Then she saw Tessa. The color drained from Marlene's face so fast, it looked like a physical effect. Her skin went from flush to chalk white in a second. Her hand tightened on the senator's arm until I thought she might bruise him. She recovered instantly. It was a masterclass in control. She excused herself from the senator and glided toward us, the silver gown swishing around her legs like liquid mercury. "Ethan," she said, kissing his cheek. "You are late. We had to pick up a guest," Ethan said, his voice surprisingly steady. Marlene turned to me. "Hazel," she said. Her voice was light, airy, but her eyes were drilling into mine with a mixture of hatred and panic. "Oh, you made it," she said. She said it as if I were a mild inconvenience, like a rain shower on a picnic day, as if my presence were an unfortunate accident she would just have to tolerate. "And this is?" she asked, looking at Tessa. "This is a friend of mine," I said calmly. "Tessa Rowland." Marlene did not extend her hand. She stared at Tessa. Tessa smiled. "Hello, Mrs. Voss, or should I say, Ms. Sterling? It has been a long time since the Creston Vale office." Marlene's jaw tightened. A small muscle jumped in her cheek. "I do not know what you are talking about," Marlene said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "This is a family gathering. I thought it was a party," I said, looking around, "and Tessa is part of the story. Marlene, just like North Pine Advisory, just like the trust." Marlene looked at me. For the first time, I saw the cracks in the armor. She looked around the room, checking to see if anyone was listening. She was terrified. She was standing in her own home, surrounded by her own friends, and she was absolutely petrified that the truth was about to spill onto her Persian rugs. "Enjoy the party," Marlene said through gritted teeth. She turned and walked away, plunging back into the crowd. I watched her go. I watched her walk up to Marcus Thorne and whisper something in his ear. I saw Thorne look at me, his face paling. I realized then that Graham was right. She would burn it all down. She was circulating the room, shoring up her defenses, whispering lies, checking the exits. She wasn't a matriarch enjoying her holiday. She was a criminal trying to keep the vault door closed while the police were banging on the front gate. Her cruelty wasn't strength, it was panic. I took a glass of sparkling water from a passing tray. "Are you ready?" Ethan asked me, stepping close. I looked at Marlene, who was now laughing too loudly near the fireplace. "I am ready," I said. The string quartet began to play Silent Night. The irony was perfect. The night was not going to be silent. It was going to be deafening. The dinner had been an exercise in suffocation. The conversation was polite. The wine was expensive. And the tension was so thick it felt like humidity. I sat through 3 courses, listening to the clink of silver against china, watching Marlene hold court. She was in her element, moving from guest to guest, cementing alliances, laughing at jokes that were not funny, and ensuring that every person in the room understood that the Voss family was a fortress that could not be breached. I ate nothing. I drank only water. I was not there to eat. I was there to deliver a verdict. When the staff cleared the dessert plates and poured the brandy, Marlene signaled for silence. She stood by the fireplace, the flames casting long, dancing shadows against the silk wallpaper. "If I could have everyone's attention for just a moment," Marlene said, her voice ringing out clear and confident. The room quieted. Faces turned toward her. Senator Miller, Marcus Thorne, the board members of the conservatory, and the extended family. They looked at her with expectance. She was the conductor, and they were the orchestra. "As many of you know, this year has been one of transition," Marlene began. "We have been working hard to ensure that the values of this family are preserved for the next generation. It is not an easy task. The world is changing. Values are eroding. But here, inside these walls, we hold the line." She smiled at Ethan. He sat beside me, his leg bouncing nervously under the table. "Ethan, come here," she said. Ethan stood up, looking like a man walking to the gallows. He approached the fireplace. Marlene reached behind a vase of winter roses and pulled out a framed document. It was heavy, encased in dark wood and gold leaf. "This is the original deed to the Voss estate," Marlene said, holding it up like a holy relic. "It has been in the vault for 40 years, but tonight, I want to entrust it to you. Ethan, not as a gift, but as a responsibility." She handed it to him. He took it, his hands shaking slightly. "This stays with blood," Marlene said. Her voice dropped an octave, becoming intimate and fierce. "It belongs to the lineage. It is not shared property. It is not marital property. It is Voss property." The room murmured approval. "Here, here," someone said. Marlene turned to me. Her eyes were bright with triumph. She had just publicly declared that I had no claim to the home, to the history, or to the future. "Hazel, dear," she said. I looked at her. "Would you mind taking a photo for us?" she asked, gesturing to the camera that sat on the side table. "It is a family moment. We want to capture it." The insult was perfect. She was asking me to document my own exclusion. She was asking me to step out of the frame, pick up the camera, and memorialize the fact that I did not belong. The room waited. They expected me to smile, to nod, to be the good, obedient daughter-in-law who knew her place. I stood up. My chair scraped against the floor, a harsh sound in the quiet room. I did not move toward the camera. I stood behind my chair, my hands resting on the back of it, grounding myself against the wood. "No, Marlene," I said. The silence that followed was instantaneous. It was the silence of a held breath. Marlene blinked. Her smile faltered for a fraction of a second, then returned. tighter than before. "Excuse me?" she said. I said no. I repeated, "I think we are done with photos." Marlene let out a light, tinkling laugh. It sounded like glass breaking. "Oh, Hazel," she said, turning to the guests with a conspiratorial roll of her eyes. "Let us not be dramatic. It is just a picture. I know you are feeling stressed lately, but let us not spoil the evening." She was playing the card. She was painting me as the unstable, jealous wife. "I am not stressed, Marlene," I said. My voice was steady. It carried to the back of the room. "And I am not dramatic. I am just confused." I walked around the table. I did not walk toward her. I walked to the center of the room, creating a triangle between myself, Marlene, and the guests. "I received a phone call from Red Harbor Title and Trust yesterday," I said. Marlene went still. The frame in Ethan's hands tipped slightly. "They informed me that there had been an attempt to delete the version history of the Voss family property file." I continued, specifically, the spousal consent forms. Marlene's eyes narrowed. "This is hardly the place for administrative talk. Hazel, we are celebrating, but it is the place," I said, "because everyone here celebrates the Voss legacy. Everyone here donates to the foundation. Everyone here trusts you. So I think they deserve to know why you have me listed in the title company database as a spouse with limited disclosure." I saw Marcus Thorne shift in his seat. I saw Graham look down at his shoes. Marlene's face hardened. "That is a standard classification," she said coldly. "It simply means the assets are premarital. You are making a scene over paperwork you do not understand." "I understand what a notary stamp means," I said, "and I understand what my signature looks like." Which brings me to my question. Why is my signature on an estate planning addendum dated 2 years ago? Marlene waved a hand dismissively. "You signed that when we consolidated the insurance policies. You have a short memory. I have a very clear memory." I said, "I remember being in the hospital. I remember being on morphine after surgery. And I remember you telling me I was signing billing forms." I turned to the room. "Is that how the Voss legacy is protected?" I asked. "By waiting until family members are medicated to get their consent?" Marlene took a step forward. Her mask was slipping. The gracious hostess was being replaced by something sharper, something dangerous. "You are ungrateful," she spat. The venom in her voice shocked the room. "We took you in. We gave you a life most people only dream of. And this is how you repay us? By nitpicking legal terms you are too greedy to understand? You are just like the rest of them. You see the money, and you think you are entitled to it." There it was, the accusation. Greedy. I did not flinch. "I do not want the money." "Marlene," I said, "I pay the mortgage on my own house. I buy my own clothes. I have never asked you for a dime." I pulled a folded piece of paper from my clutch. "But since you brought up money, let us talk about the Voss Meridian Trust, specifically. Clause 14b. I unfolded the paper. "Any act of public disparagement by the spouse shall result in an immediate freeze of all distributions to the beneficiary." I looked at Ethan. "She told you that if I spoke up, she would cut you off, didn't she?" I asked. "She told you that if I asked questions, you would lose your income." Ethan stood there, clutching the framed deed. His face was pale, sweat beading on his forehead. He looked at his mother. He looked at me. "Ethan?" Marlene said, her voice a warning shot. "Do not do this." Ethan looked at the guests. He saw the doubt in their eyes. He saw the way they were looking at Marlene, not as a matriarch, but as a bully. "She made me sign it," Ethan said. His voice shook, but it was audible. Marlene froze. "She told me I had no choice," Ethan continued, his voice gaining a little strength. "She said I had to give her control over my finances or she would let me go bankrupt. She said Hazel was a liability. She said I had to keep Hazel in the dark." The room shifted. The air changed. This was not a petty in-law spat. This was coercion. This was a mother holding her son hostage. Marlene's hands curled into fists at her sides. "You are weak," she hissed at Ethan. "You have always been weak. I did what I had to do to protect you from yourself." "Protect him from what?" I asked. From his own debt? I turned to Marcus Thorne. Mr. Thorne, I said. Marcus jumped. He looked like he wanted to vanish into the upholstery. You are the CFO of the Caldwell Civic Foundation, I said. You oversee the restricted donor pools. Hazel, Marcus stammered. This is highly inappropriate. Is it inappropriate to ask about restricted donor pool B? I asked. The color drained from Marcus Thorne's face. It was as if I had shot him. Marlene stepped in front of him, blocking my line of sight. Stop this, she commanded. You are ranting. You are making up stories. I am not making it up. I said, I have the emails. Marlene, I have the transfer logs. I raised my voice slightly, ensuring everyone could hear. 5 years ago, Ethan had a debt of $450,000. You paid it, but you did not pay it from the Voss family accounts. You transferred $450,000 from the Foundation's restricted donor pool to a company called Meridian Event Strategies. A gasp went through the room. The senator looked at Marlene with wide eyes. That is a lie, Marlene said, but her voice was shrill. It is in the ledger, I said. Meridian Event Strategies received the funds. Then Meridian wired the funds to Ethan's creditors. And for the last 3 years, Ethan has been paying it back into a hidden account at Stonegate Fidelity to cover the hole in the Foundation's books. I looked at the donors sitting at the tables. That money was meant for scholarships. I said, it was meant for building repairs. It was meant for the community. Why was it used to cover a private loss? Marlene was shaking. She looked cornered. She looked feral. Graham stood up from his chair. Graham, sit down, Marlene snapped. Graham did not sit down. He looked at his wife with a mixture of horror and resignation. I knew, Graham whispered. Marlene whipped her head around. Shut up, Graham. I knew there was money moving, Graham said, his voice trembling. I saw the statements years ago. I asked you about it. You told me it was necessary. You told me it was the only way to save the name. You coward, Marlene hissed. I did it for you. I did it for this house. You did it for yourself. I said. Marlene spun back to face me. Her eyes were wild. You think you know everything, she screamed. You think you can walk in here with your little spreadsheets and judge me? You have no idea what it takes to keep a family like this alive. You have no idea what I had to sacrifice. She was losing control. The veneer was gone. You do not understand what I had to change to survive, she shouted. The room went deadly silent. What you had to change? I asked softly. I stepped back and gestured to the hallway. Tessa, I said. Tessa Rowland walked into the room. She looked small in the grand doorway, but her presence was like a granite block. Marlene stared at her. Marlene's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Hello? Marlene? Tessa said. Who is this? The senator asked, looking confused. This is Tessa Rowland, I said. She used to work for a company called Meridian Event Strategies. I turned to Tessa. Tessa, who was your boss at Meridian? She was, Tessa said, pointing at Marlene. But she didn't go by Marlene Voss back then. She went by Marlene Sterling. And on the payroll documents, when the IRS audited us, her name came up as Marlene Hatcher. Marlene Hatcher. The name hung in the air. Marlene Voss. The queen of Briar Glen. The arbiter of taste. The woman who obsessed over lineage and blood. Was a fiction. She was a reinvention. Tessa looked at the guests. She made us shred the files, Tessa said. When she dissolved the company 5 years ago, she told us to burn the hard drives. She said if anyone found out about the transfers from the foundation, we would all go to jail. Marlene looked around the room. She saw the faces of her friends, her allies, her family. They were looking at her with a dawning, horrified realization. They weren't looking at an eccentric matriarch. They were looking at a fraud. You, Marlene stammered, you brought this person here to lie about me? She pointed a shaking finger at me. She is lying, Marlene screamed. Hazel forged those documents. She manipulated Ethan. She is trying to steal the estate. It was her last card, the denial, the reversal of blame. I reached into my clutch and pulled out one final piece of paper. It was a receipt. I did not forge anything. "Marlene," I said, "and just so you know, I gave the entire packet, the emails, the title documents, the bank transfers, and the background check on Marlene Hatcher, to my attorney, Dara Klein, this morning." Marlene went still. "It is time-stamped," I said. "It is notarized, and it is filed in a secure server that I do not have access to delete. If anything happens to me, or to Ethan, or to Tessa, that file goes directly to the Attorney General." I looked her in the eye. "You cannot spin this," I said. "You cannot hide it. It is done." Marlene stared at me. Her chest was heaving. She looked at Ethan, who was standing with his head bowed. She looked at Graham, who was weeping silently into his hands. She looked at the donors, who were already pulling out their phones, likely texting their lawyers. She had lost, and in that moment, she did the only thing she knew how to do. She ran. She did not apologize. She did not explain. She turned on her heel, her silver dress swirling around her, and stormed out of the room. We heard her heels clicking frantically on the hardwood floor of the hallway, then the heavy slam of the library door. The room was left in a stunned, vibrating silence. The string quartet had stopped playing. A waiter dropped a spoon, and the sound was like a gunshot. Graham Voss stood there, looking at the empty doorway where his wife had vanished. He looked like a man who had watched his house burn down and was now standing in the ashes. He turned to me. His eyes were red and wet. "Hazel," he croaked. I looked at him. I felt no triumph. I felt only a profound, exhausting sadness. "What do you want?" Graham asked. His voice broke. "Do you want money? Do you want a divorce? Do you want to run the foundation?" I looked at Ethan. He was still holding the legacy document. He looked at it, then let it drop from his hands. It hit the floor with a heavy thud, the glass cracking. I looked back at Graham. "I do not want your money, Graham," I said quietly, "and I do not want your foundation." I looked around the room, at the gilded cage Marlene had built, at the people who had watched me be humiliated for 3 years and said nothing. "I want my name out of your machinery," I said. I turned to Ethan. "Are you coming?" I asked. Ethan looked at his father. He looked at the cracked frame on the floor. He looked at the door where his mother had fled. Then he looked at me. "Yes," he said. He walked over to me. He took my hand. His palm was cold and clammy, but his grip was firm. We walked out. We walked past the stunned guests. We walked past Marcus Thorne, who was shaking his head, muttering, "No, no, no." We walked past Tessa, who gave me a small, grim nod. We walked out the front door of Larkspur Ridge and into the biting cold of the December night. The snow was falling softly, covering the world in white. The air was clean. It tasted like ice and freedom. We walked to the car in silence. I did not know what would happen next. I did not know if the foundation would survive. I did not know if Marlene would go to prison. I did not know if my marriage could survive the wreckage of the truth we had just uncovered. Ethan opened the car door for me. He looked at me, and for the first time in 3 years, I saw the man I had married, stripped of the fear, stripped of the legacy, just a man standing in the snow. "I am sorry," he whispered. "I know," I said. I got into the car. He got into the driver's seat. We drove away from the great house on the hill, leaving the lights blazing behind us, leaving the Voss family to face the ruins of their perfect image. The machinery was broken. The secret was out, and for the first time, the road ahead was dark, but it was mine. Thank you so much for listening to My Wife's Mother Ignored Me Publicly. I uncovered her secret in front of our family. It has been a journey uncovering the lies of the Voss family with you. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Please drop a comment below with your city or country. It is always amazing to see how far these stories travel. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more dramas about justice, secrets, and family betrayal, please make sure to subscribe to Revenge Stories, and do not forget to share your thoughts on Hazel's final decision in the comments. Did she do the right thing? I will be reading your responses.